Hi there, today I'm doing a video to help you choose a security system. It's a minefield out there. The number of security systems out there is ridiculous, and I've reviewed quite a few of them in the background anyway. And if you look at the channel, you can see a lot of the system that I have done. So I thought it's actually worth doing a video with basic information regarding choosing a system to assist you so you have enough information to make a well-educated choice, so you don't get any unexpected surprises when you purchase a system. Now, first of all, let's begin with some general information, which probably applies to most cameras out there. So first of all, let's start with resolution. So in terms of resolution, you've got 720p, 1080p and 4K. But an important value to take into consideration is the megapixel value. Now, some systems don't actually highlight that. It's worth actually reaching out to the manufacturer and asking them what the megapixel value is. In general, what I've found, most cameras have 1 to 2 megapixel and mostly they're 2 megapixel. You may have seen other videos I've done demonstrating some of these systems, and even though it says 1080p, picture quality might be quite poor, only because it might be a 1 megapixel camera, for instance. The megapixels in a camera aren't sufficient enough to guarantee better picture quality. Other things to consider are the lenses and image sensors together with image processing algorithms on the camera. So all in conjunction help in improving the picture quality. If you're after a camera with zoom facility, best to go with one with optical zoom on there. Digital zoom will be reasonable, but not as good as optical. With optical, you can zoom in quite a lot and see quite a bit of detail. So keep that in mind if you're after that option. The other thing to keep in mind is microphone and speakers. So some cameras actually have a microphone built in. As it's recording footage, it's also recording the audio that's going on around. You may not think that's that useful, but in some scenarios it can be, because some cameras even have the ability to alert you if there's noises of a certain decibel or certain levels, and send you a notification that there's some noises going on, as well as motion detection, which can be very useful too. So as well as microphones, you can also get a speaker as well. So if you get a speaker, then you can have a two-way audio situation. If the person's fairly close to the camera, you can have a conversation with them. Now, keep in mind the fact that if they're a fair distance away from the camera, then sound quality may be a little bit poorer. So you want to have it at a reasonable distance. So if you had your camera really high up and they're about 3 meters or 4 meters away and you've got background noise outside, you may struggle to hear them, or they may struggle to hear you. But again, an option to keep in mind, you may want to speak to them when they're close to your property, or if you're inside your house, for instance. Next thing is storage. There's a number of different storage options. So many cameras have micro SD card slots. You just put a micro SD card in and it'll record locally. And in terms of recording, the way it generally works is if it's a Wi-Fi camera and you lose Wi-Fi connectivity, the recording still gets recorded onto the camera. And that's general amongst most of these cameras. Then you have a situation where you have a base station and the recordings are made directly onto that. So I can give you an example of that one. So Eufy is a good example. That has a base station, wireless cameras, and the data gets directly recorded onto the base station. One advantage of that is if the camera gets stolen, then you've got no footage. If you've got the base station, at least it's recorded on that, and the base station would be in your property. Another example of a base station would be like a NVR or DVR system. So that's where you have a recorder. So that's a full CCTV system over here, and that NVR would be placed in your property as well. And if the cameras get damaged or get stolen, for instance, footage will all be on there. Now, the thing to be aware of, if your property gets broken into, they can steal the base station or the NVR. So the other option is cloud-based storage. This is where you have internet connectivity and there's some storage in the cloud, and it gets transferred up into the cloud and you can access it via there. Now, keep in mind, if you have an unstable internet connection, then there's no point going for that option, only because there could be potential to lose data. Another thing worth mentioning is compression. All the devices, when they record, they use compression algorithm to compress the video data. The general format I've found is H.264. That's quite new these days, and it provides a good amount of compression so you can get more data onto your card or your storage. Another thing worth mentioning is ONVIF, and that stands for Open Network Video Interface Forum. And any cameras that support this, it gives a generic interface for applications to add in those cameras. So you don't have to go for the app associated with the camera. You could get a generic app on your phone, on your computer, for instance, and you can connect directly to that camera. All you'll have to do is enter in the IP address, username and password, and that's it. But be aware, you may not be able to remotely connect via it. You'll still have to use the software for the camera, unless you open up ports on the router, and that may allow you to get around that. So that's some basic details to be aware of. Now let's move on to the different camera options there. So you've got 3 types of camera options. First one is battery powered, then you've got Wi-Fi, and then a fully fledged CCTV system. Now, coming on to the battery side of things, you've got a number of options. So first one being standalone cameras. Standalone cameras, a good example would be the Energy camera I've got here, a Wi-Fi camera, takes batteries. Another one would be Reolink. They do a couple of cameras which also work off an internal battery, and for some of them you can even buy a solar panel to keep that battery charged up. So that's normally a trickle charge. Depending on the weather conditions, if it's cloudy, sun levels aren't very high outside, it won't give much of a charge, but if sun levels are high, you can give a general charge to these cameras. Now, keep in mind the way these cameras work, they have a PIR sensor on them. What happens when there's activity, the PIR sensor then activates the camera to initiate a record. So the camera's never really on, just the sensor's on. Now, there is a slight issue with that. If you have activity happening, the first second or half a second may be missed. And that could be the vital moment you're after. So a bit of a frustration with these cameras. So if it's in an area you're not too bothered by getting the first initial movement that's been detected, then these cameras are fine. If you are bothered about that, then there could be an issue. The next type of battery camera is the one with a base station. You've got a Xiaomi one here, Blink's one here, and Eufy. All these systems have a base station, and the camera connects to that base station, does the recording. Now, Blink's wise, I was really impressed by the fact that they actually give free cloud storage. But a disadvantage if you didn't want to use cloud storage and you wanted just local recording for privacy purposes, only because this is all being put on the cloud, you don't know who's going to have access to it. If you're concerned about that, it's not a good option to go for that. Eufy's a good option because it actually has a base station, storage on there, and it'll record directly onto there. Now, the nice thing about the base station is it can be put in a location which is a reasonable distance from the cameras, and then the cameras can dump the footage directly onto the base station. Good option there, but again, because it's battery powered, the performance will be similar in that the cameras will be in a sleep mode, and when the PIR detects movement, it will wake up the camera and the footage is recorded. Recording wise, footage will be minimal only because to conserve power here. You can increase the amount of footage that gets recorded, but keep in mind that will reduce battery life, and then you'll have to charge it up. That's a real thing to keep in mind with these battery powered systems. Factor. If you don't like taking things off again and charging them up, not really a good option to go for. But if you wanted the ease of installation, no messing around with any wires, this is a good option here. Next one to mention are the Wi-Fi cameras. So these cameras, Wi-Fi ones, normally connect on 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. There's some connect on 5 gigahertz. The only ones I've come across so far is the SimCam S1 and the Reolink one here, and that's an outdoor camera. Comes to recording on these cameras, normally take a micro SD card and record locally. Wi-Fi signal is disrupted, recording still gets recorded on with most of these cameras. I've not really noticed it in a situation where if you lose Wi-Fi, it doesn't record anything. The good thing about this is, it gives you a quick solution to get a camera installed and up and running. The thing to be aware of is power. These are wired, so you'll have to have a plug nearby to plug it in and then obviously keep this running. With the outdoor ones, it can be a bit of a hassle, only because how many people have outdoor power sources? You may have the cable coming back into your house, maybe through a window. Doesn't look nice, but obviously gives you an easy solution to this. Now, as well as this, you can get a complete CCTV system, which is Wi-Fi based as well. They're pretty good, but thing to be in mind is the range on them. So they have to be near the base station to have the recordings coming. If there's any sort of obstruction or any sort of jammer device, that signal can be blocked and nothing recorded. I don't like Wi-Fi CCTV systems only because of the hassle of having to have a plug nearby to plug this in. I know it's not a big deal, but still got to keep that in mind. The other thing is the range from the base station. So if you've got walls in the way or any sort of objects, obviously that's going to restrict the range of the camera to NVR, so the network video recorder. Easy solutions if you find it too tricky to run cables around your property. Let's move on to wired systems. So you've got DVR and power over Ethernet. So both systems are pretty good, but in terms of ease of setup, I think power over Ethernet is much better, only because you don't have to have a plug nearby. Some of these DVR systems, resolution wise, it's not too bad. Price wise, they're really cheap as well. But what you may have to have a plug nearby the camera, or the cable coming down, you'll have to have additional plugs nearby. I don't really like the idea of that. I prefer using an Ethernet cable going directly from the camera to the system, and that's it, and only one plug to power the actual recorder. Now the system you see here, that's from Reolink, and that's a 4K system. Also has a microphone built in. So not many systems actually have a microphone built in, and I think it's a useful functionality to have on a CCTV system. So if you were alerted and you didn't see anything, good to have the sound. So someone could be breaking glass or making noise there, and you can hear what's going on and gives you a better indication something is actually happening. So I've been using a system from Anki for a number of years. No issues with the system. Works well. The only thing I didn't like about it is it didn't have push notification. If there was an alert, I wanted to be notified about it, it couldn't do push notifications. But Reolink system here, it can do push notifications. 4K picture quality. Camera wise, each camera is 8 megapixels. Picture quality is very good on this, and has microphones built onto all the cameras. So I'll be upgrading my system to this one very soon. Now, coming onto Megapixel and these cameras in general, the best picture quality I've seen on a standalone outdoor camera is probably the Amcrest camera. It's 4K, 8 megapixel, and it's absolutely crystal clear. So very impressive. And then following on from that, the Reolink's one here, it's 1080p but 4 megapixel, and also supports 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi. Now keep in mind, even though it's 5 gigahertz, the range on 5 gigahertz is much shorter than 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi. So if you're going to purchase this, keep in mind it might not be able to reach your router unless your router is very close by. You might have to get a separate extender for it, or just connect via 2.4 gigahertz. So there you go, some basic details about purchasing a CCTV camera or system. I personally prefer buying a fully fledged power over Ethernet system. I get asked this many a time, what's the best system? And I'd say go for a wired system if you can, if it's not too much trouble. Sometimes it's worth going to the hassle of just running the wires because you know you've got a good dedicated stream going to the recorder. Battery powered wise, it's not an issue buying one of these systems. They're not hassle at all. My only concern here is the fact that missing something. Now, what I found with wired systems, get them in and then make sure they're recorded 24/7, and you've got motion detection on there as well. So even with motion detection on the systems, you'll still miss a little bit. I've had situations where I've been looking out for certain footage and it's all missing only because it doesn't initiate quick enough. So have it recording 24/7, and then obviously turn on your motion detection as well, and it will pick up, so you can go backwards as well and pick up any sort of things. Now, if you wanted to build your own CCTV systems with standalone cameras, that's possible as well. You just need to get some software. As long as the camera supports OnVIF, you should be fine. I've actually used some of these cameras to record directly onto a Synology NAS server. It actually has surveillance software built onto it. So if it has OnVIF, it will record onto a Synology device, which is really nice bit of functionality. You may not get all the granular functionality you do from a fully fledged CCTV system, but still works well. The other thing to keep in mind, if you're after a system with a floodlight or some sort of deterrent. So some companies do that, and Reolink do one here. It's got a floodlight on the front and also has a built-in siren. You can set the siren to go off if motion's detected, but keep in mind if it does randomly keep going off, it might start annoying either your neighbors or even yourself. So there you go. I hope this has helped people. I didn't want to push any particular system here. I just wanted to give some general information, what to expect with these different types of systems. Details for all these systems I've just shown here are in the description below if you're interested in them. Thanks for viewing, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.